The ocean is humanity's final frontier, a vast expanse of mystery that covers more than 70% of our planet's surface. Yet despite all our technological advances, less than 5% of it has been explored. And sometimes, when divers venture into the deepest, most remote corners of the underwater world, they discover that the ocean holds secrets far more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. This is the story of one such expedition, where a routine dive became a nightmare of survival against impossible odds, and where the very forces of nature conspired to trap experienced divers in a watery tomb. As always, viewer discretion is advised. The Red Sea off the coast of Egypt has long been considered one of the world's premier diving destinations. With crystal-clear waters, vibrant coral reefs, and an abundance of marine life, it attracts thousands of divers every year. The water temperature hovers around a comfortable 26 degrees Celsius, or 79 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility often exceeds 40 meters, making it an ideal location for both recreational and technical diving. But beneath this seemingly tranquil surface lies a complex network of underwater caves, tunnels, and crevasses carved out over millions of years by geological forces. These formations, while breathtakingly beautiful, represent some of the most dangerous diving environments on Earth. Unlike open water diving, where a diver can always ascend directly to the surface, cave diving presents unique challenges. Overhead environments eliminate the option of emergency ascent, navigation becomes critical, and equipment failure can quickly turn fatal. It was here, in October 2019, that a team of 6 experienced technical divers gathered for what was supposed to be a routine exploration of an underwater cave system known locally as the Devil's Throat. The team consisted of diving professionals from 3 different countries, each with hundreds of log dives and extensive cave diving experience. Leading the expedition was Markus Weber, a 42-year-old German dive instructor with over 2,000 log dives and 15 years of cave diving experience. Weber had explored underwater caves across the globe, from the cenotes of Mexico to the blue holes of Belize. His reputation for safety and meticulous planning had made him one of the most sought-after technical diving guides in the Red Sea region. Joining Weber were 2 British divers, Sarah Collins, a 38-year-old marine biologist who had been studying Red Sea coral formations for over a decade, and James Morrison, a 45-year-old commercial diver who worked on offshore oil rigs in the North Sea. The team also included 2 experienced Italian cave divers, Marco Rossi and Elena Ferrara, both in their early 30s and partners, both in diving and in life. Rounding out the group was Ahmed Hassan, a 29-year-old Egyptian diving guide who knew the local waters better than perhaps anyone alive. The Devil's Throat had earned its ominous name from its distinctive shape, a narrow vertical shaft that dropped down through the reef face before opening into a larger horizontal tunnel system. What made this particular cave system unique was its connection to a series of underwater thermal vents, which created unusual current patterns and water temperature variations throughout the cave network. Local diving folklore spoke of strange phenomena within the cave, stories of divers reporting unusual sounds, unexpected currents, and equipment behaving erratically. Most experienced divers dismissed these tales as typical cave diving mythology, the kind of stories that emerge whenever people venture into dark, mysterious underwater spaces. But Ahmed Hassan, who had grown up diving these waters, had always harbored a healthy respect for the old stories. The team had spent 3 days conducting preliminary dives, mapping the outer sections of the cave and establishing safety protocols. Weber's approach was methodical and conservative. He insisted on redundant safety systems, multiple exit strategies, and constant communication between team members. Each diver carried 3 separate light sources, backup breathing apparatus, and emergency signaling devices. On the morning of October 15th, conditions appeared perfect for their deepest penetration dive yet. The sea was calm, visibility was exceptional at nearly 50 meters, and weather reports showed stable conditions for the next 48 hours. The plan was straightforward: descend to 45 meters, enter the Devil's Throat, and explore approximately 200 meters into the horizontal tunnel system before turning back. What none of them could have anticipated was that far beneath the Red Sea floor, tectonic forces had been building pressure for months. The same geological activity that had created the thermal vents was about to manifest in a way that would trap them in one of the ocean's most unforgiving environments. The dive began at 9:30 m local time. The team descended in formation, with Weber leading and Hassan bringing up the rear. At 20 meters depth, they paused to equalize and check their equipment. Everything appeared normal. The water was crystal clear, and the morning sun penetrated the depths in shimmering rays that danced across the coral formations. As they approached the entrance to the Devil's Throat at 45 meters, Weber noticed the first unusual sign. The water temperature, which should have been a consistent 26 degrees Celsius, began fluctuating dramatically. His dive computer registered temperature swings from 24 to 28 degrees within the span of a few seconds. He signaled to the team to hold position while he investigated. Sarah Collins, positioned just behind Weber, later described feeling an almost imperceptible vibration in the water, like a distant rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. At first, she attributed it to a passing boat far above, but the sensation persisted and seemed to be growing stronger. Weber made the decision to proceed, reasoning that thermal variations were not uncommon near underwater vents. The team entered the Devil's Throat in single file, each diver maintaining visual contact with the person ahead. The narrow vertical shaft required careful navigation, as the walls were lined with delicate coral formations that could be easily damaged by careless fin kicks. As they descended through the throat, the water temperature continued to fluctuate wildly. More concerning was the change in water clarity. Despite perfect visibility at the surface, the water within the cave was becoming increasingly turbid, as if fine sediment was being stirred up from somewhere deep within the system. At 65 meters depth, the vertical shaft opened into a horizontal tunnel approximately 4 meters wide and 3 meters high. This was the main artery of the cave system, and according to their maps, it extended for over 500 meters before branching into smaller passages. The team had planned to explore only the first 200 meters before beginning their return journey. As they entered the horizontal section, Marco Rossi noticed that his dive computer was behaving strangely. The depth reading was fluctuating, and the compass seemed to be spinning without any apparent cause. He signaled his concerns to Elena, who checked her own instruments and found similar anomalies. Electronic equipment malfunctions in caves were not unheard of, often caused by mineral deposits or electromagnetic interference, but the extent of the problems was unusual. The team had penetrated approximately 150 meters into the tunnel when the first major incident occurred. James Morrison, swimming in the middle of the formation, suddenly found himself struggling against an unexpected current. What had been still water moments before was now flowing with increasing force toward the deeper sections of the cave. Weber immediately called for a halt and assessed the situation. Cave diving protocols dictate that any significant change in conditions warrants an immediate abort of the dive. The current, while not overwhelmingly strong, was definitely pushing the team deeper into the cave system, exactly the opposite direction they needed to go for a safe exit. As the team prepared to turn around, the rumbling sensation that Sarah had noticed earlier intensified dramatically. Through the water, they could feel deep, resonant vibrations that seemed to come from the very bedrock around them. Equipment began rattling, and loose sediment started falling from the cave ceiling like underwater snow. Ahmed Hassan, with his intimate knowledge of local geology, immediately recognized what was happening. The thermal vents that heated portions of the cave system were connected to much deeper geological processes. The vibrations could only mean one thing: seismic activity was occurring somewhere in the Red Sea Rift system. Before Hassan could communicate his concerns to the team, the ocean floor shuddered. Even at 65 meters depth and 150 meters inside a cave system, the earthquake was unmistakable. What the divers couldn't know was that a magnitude 5.8 earthquake had just struck approximately 200 kilometers to the south, triggering a cascade of secondary geological events throughout the region. The immediate effect within the cave was catastrophic. The gentle current that had been pushing them deeper suddenly intensified into a powerful flow. What had been a manageable 1-knot current became a 4-knot torrent that made swimming against it nearly impossible. The team found themselves being inexorably drawn deeper into the cave system, despite their best efforts to fight against the flow. Weber shouted through his regulator for the team to grab onto anything they could find, but the smooth limestone walls of the tunnel offered few handholds. One by one, the divers were swept past their planned turnaround point and into unexplored sections of the cave. Elena Ferrara managed to wedge herself into a small alcove in the tunnel wall, but the force of the current made it impossible for her to help the others. She watched helplessly as Marco was swept past her, his powerful fin kicks no match for the hydraulic force of the water. Within minutes, the entire team had been separated and carried into the deeper recesses of the Devil's Throat. The cause of the sudden current surge was rooted in the same geological processes that had created the cave system millions of years ago. The earthquake had opened new fissures in the seafloor, creating additional pathways for water to flow into the cave network. Simultaneously, the seismic activity had caused changes in the thermal vent system, creating pressure differentials that drove massive volumes of water through the tunnels. Essentially, the cave had transformed from a static environment into a giant underwater river system, with currents powerful enough to overwhelm even the strongest swimmers. The divers found themselves in a situation that no amount of training or experience could have fully prepared them for. They were being swept into uncharted underwater territory with no known exit routes. Weber, fighting desperately against the current, managed to grab onto a rocky protrusion about 200 meters past their original turnaround point. His breathing was labored from the exertion, and he knew that burning through his air supply at an accelerated rate could be fatal. He activated his emergency signaling device, hoping that other members of the team were close enough to see the flashing light. The signal was spotted by Sarah Collins, who had managed to find temporary shelter in a side passage approximately 50 meters away. The marine biologist was in a better position than most to understand what was happening from a scientific perspective, but that knowledge was cold comfort in their current predicament. She knew that seismic activity could alter underwater cave systems permanently, potentially creating new passages while sealing off others. As she made her way toward Weber's position, fighting against the current with every fin kick, Sarah's mind raced through possible escape scenarios. The current was flowing deeper into the cave, which meant it had to be exiting somewhere. If they could follow the flow and find where the water was going, they might discover an alternative exit route. But that strategy carried enormous risks. They would be swimming into completely unknown territory with no guarantee of finding a way out. Meanwhile, deeper in the cave system, Marco Rossi found himself in a nightmare scenario. He had been swept approximately 400 meters from the original entry point and was now in a section of the cave that narrowed considerably. The current had deposited him in what appeared to be a dead-end chamber, but the force of the water suggested that it was flowing somewhere. As Marco explored the chamber with his primary light, he discovered that the water was being forced through a restriction in the cave wall, an opening perhaps 1.5 meters wide and barely tall enough for a diver to pass through. The current was so strong at this point that approaching the restriction was dangerous, but it appeared to be the only way forward. Making one of the most difficult decisions of his diving career, Marco decided to allow the current to carry him through the restriction. The alternative was to remain trapped in the dead-end chamber until his air supply ran out. As he approached the narrow opening, he tucked his arms close to his body and tried to present the smallest possible profile to avoid getting stuck. The experience of being pulled through the underwater tunnel was terrifying beyond description. Marco later compared it to being inside a giant washing machine, tumbling and spinning as the current carried him through a maze of limestone passages. His equipment was battered against the rock walls, and he lost one of his backup lights in the process. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than 2 minutes, Marco emerged into a much larger chamber. The current here was significantly reduced, allowing him to regain some control over his movement. But as he looked around with his remaining lights, his heart sank. The chamber appeared to have no obvious exits except for the restriction he had just passed through, and fighting back against that current would be impossible. Elena Ferrara, still wedged in her alcove near the original tunnel, faced her own desperate situation. She had managed to avoid being swept deeper into the cave, but she was now completely alone and had no idea where the rest of her team had been carried. Her air supply was adequate for the moment, but she knew that staying in the alcove indefinitely was not an option. The Italian cave diver made the decision to carefully work her way back toward the cave entrance, hoping that the current might be weaker closer to the original entry point. It was a calculated risk. If the entire tunnel system was affected by the strong currents, she might simply be delaying the inevitable. But her experience in Mediterranean caves had taught her that water flows often varied significantly within the same system. As Elena carefully made her way back along the tunnel wall, she discovered that the current was indeed somewhat weaker near the ceiling of the passage. By swimming close to the limestone roof and using small handholds and crevices, she was able to make slow progress toward the entrance. But even at the reduced current speed, the journey was exhausting, and she was consuming air at a much higher rate than normal. Back at the surface, the dive boat crew was beginning to worry. The team's planned dive time had been 45 minutes, but they had now been underwater for over an hour. The boat captain, an experienced local named Mahmoud, had felt the earthquake and was aware that seismic activity could create dangerous conditions for cave divers. At the 90-minute mark, Mahmoud made the decision to call for emergency assistance. The Egyptian Coast Guard maintained a specialized dive rescue team trained specifically for cave diving emergencies, but their response time from the nearest base would be at least 2 hours. In the meantime, the surface crew could only wait and watch for any sign of the missing divers. Deep within the cave system, Weber and Sarah had managed to reunite and were now exploring a side passage that seemed to offer some protection from the main current flow. The German dive instructor was methodically checking his equipment and calculating remaining air supplies for both divers. Their situation was serious but not yet desperate. They still had sufficient breathing gas for another 45 minutes at their current consumption rate. Sarah's scientific training proved invaluable in analyzing their predicament. She had realized that the earthquake had likely created multiple new pathways through the cave system, which meant that following any current flow might lead to either a new exit or a dead end. Without detailed knowledge of the geology, they were essentially navigating blind through a 3-dimensional maze. The two divers decided to explore the side passage, reasoning that it might connect to other parts of the cave system or even lead to an alternative exit. As they swam deeper into the passage, they noticed that the water temperature was increasing significantly. Sarah's dive computer registered 32 degrees Celsius, warm enough to indicate proximity to thermal vents. After swimming for approximately 100 meters, the passage opened into a remarkable chamber unlike anything either diver had seen before. The cavern was roughly spherical, perhaps 20 meters in diameter, and filled with naturally occurring formations that looked almost crystalline in their dive lights. More importantly, the chamber appeared to have multiple tunnels branching off in different directions. Weber and Sarah realized they had discovered a central hub within the cave system, a natural junction where multiple passages converged. If they could determine which tunnel led back toward the entrance, they might be able to escape the current flows that had trapped them. But choosing the wrong passage could lead them even deeper into the cave network with no way to return. As they explored the chamber, Sarah made a crucial observation. One of the tunnels had noticeably cooler water flowing from it, suggesting it might be connected to the main cave system closer to the entrance. The thermal gradient could serve as their navigation guide, by following the cooler water, they might be able to work their way back to the original entry point. Meanwhile, James Morrison had been carried even deeper into the cave system than the others. The commercial diver's experience working in harsh underwater conditions had served him well, and he had managed to avoid panic despite being swept into completely unknown territory. He found himself in what appeared to be an enormous underwater cavern, easily 50 meters across and extending beyond the range of his dive lights. The current in this deep chamber was much weaker, allowing Morrison to explore more freely. What he discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The cavern contained the remnants of what appeared to be much older cave formations, suggesting that the earthquake had opened passages that had been sealed for possibly thousands of years. Morrison's exploration of the deep chamber revealed something unexpected, a faint glow coming from what appeared to be another tunnel entrance. As he swam closer, he realized that the light was actually sunlight filtering through water. Somewhere ahead was a connection to the surface. The discovery filled Morrison with both hope and apprehension. The light could indicate an alternative exit route, but it could also be coming from a vertical shaft that was too narrow or too deep to provide a practical escape route. His air supply was now becoming a critical factor. He had perhaps 20 minutes of breathing gas remaining at his current depth. Making one of the most crucial decisions of the entire ordeal, Morrison decided to follow the light source. As he swam toward the glow, the tunnel began to angle upward, confirming his hope that it led toward the surface. The passage was narrow but navigable, and most importantly, there was no significant current flow that would prevent him from swimming through it. After following the tunnel for what seemed like an eternity, Morrison emerged into brilliant sunlight. He had found a natural chimney in the reef that connected to the deep cave system, a secondary entrance that was completely unknown to local divers. The opening was narrow and partially concealed by coral growth, which explained why it had never been discovered during previous explorations of the area. Morrison immediately began signaling for help, using his emergency whistle and waving his arms to attract attention from any boats in the area. His emergence at an unexpected location initially confused the surface search teams, but once they realized what had happened, they quickly moved to establish communication with the other trapped divers. Back in the thermal chamber, Weber and Sarah had made the decision to follow the cooler water tunnel. Their gamble paid off after swimming for approximately 150 meters. They began to recognize formations from their earlier exploration. They were back in the main tunnel system, but now the current flow had decreased significantly. The reduction in current strength was due to the fact that the new fissures opened by the earthquake had begun to stabilize, creating a more balanced pressure system throughout the cave network. While the flow was still stronger than normal, it was no longer the overwhelming torrent that had initially swept them deeper into the cave. Elena Ferrara, still making her way along the tunnel ceiling, had managed to reach a point where she could see the faint glow of the cave entrance. The Italian diver was exhausted from fighting the current, and her air supply was running dangerously low, but the sight of daylight ahead gave her the strength to continue. As she neared the entrance, Elena encountered Weber and Sarah, who were making their final approach to the exit. The three divers assisted each other through the most challenging section of the ascent, sharing air when necessary and providing mutual support during decompression stops. The situation for Marco Rossi remained the most precarious. Trapped in the deep chamber with no apparent exit except the restriction he had passed through, he was facing the very real possibility that his air supply would run out before rescue could reach him. His exploration of the chamber had revealed no alternative passages, and the current flow through the restriction remained too strong to swim against. In a desperate attempt to signal his location, Marco began using rocks to bang against the chamber walls, hoping that the sound might travel through the limestone and alert other divers or surface teams to his position. The technique was a long shot, but it was one of the few options remaining to him. The rescue operation on the surface had mobilized extensive resources. The Egyptian Coast Guard had deployed their specialized cave diving team, and experienced technical divers from diving centers throughout the Red Sea region had volunteered to assist in the search. The challenge was that the earthquake had potentially altered the cave system so significantly that existing maps were no longer reliable. Morrison's discovery of the alternative entrance provided rescue teams with crucial new information about the cave network's layout. Technical divers began exploring from this new entry point, mapping the passages and searching for any sign of Marco Rossi, who remained unaccounted for. Using underwater communication devices, the rescue team was able to establish contact with Marco in his trapped chamber. The commercial diver reported that his air supply was critically low, with perhaps 10 minutes of breathing time remaining at his current depth and stress level. An emergency air supply drop was impossible given the restrictions and current flows between the rescue divers and Marco's location. The solution came from an unexpected source. One of the rescue divers exploring from Morrison's entrance discovered that the chamber where Marco was trapped had a small opening in the ceiling that led to a different part of the cave system. The opening was too small for a diver wearing standard equipment, but it might be possible for someone to pass through with minimal gear. A volunteer rescue diver named Amira, a petite Egyptian technical diving instructor with extensive cave rescue experience, volunteered for the dangerous mission. Stripping down to minimal equipment and carrying only emergency air supplies, she squeezed through the ceiling opening and entered Marco's chamber. The emergency air transfer allowed Marco to survive long enough for the rescue team to develop a plan to extract him from the chamber. Using cutting tools, they were able to slightly enlarge the ceiling opening, creating just enough space for Marco to escape with assistance. One by one, all 6 members of the original diving team were successfully extracted from the Devil's Throat cave system. The rescue operation took over 8 hours and involved more than 30 divers from 5 different countries. It stands as one of the most complex underwater rescue operations ever conducted in the Red Sea region. The aftermath of the incident led to significant changes in cave diving protocols throughout the region. The Egyptian diving authorities implemented new requirements for seismic monitoring before technical diving operations, and emergency communication systems were improved to provide better coordination between diving teams and surface support. Investigation of the earthquake's effects on the cave system revealed that the seismic activity had created more than 12 new passages and chambers, fundamentally altering the underwater geography of the Devil's Throat. Several of the original passages were partially or completely blocked by rockfall, making future diving in the system significantly more dangerous. For the 6 divers involved in the incident, the experience left lasting impacts on their approach to technical diving. Weber continued to lead cave diving expeditions, but implemented even more conservative safety protocols, including real-time seismic monitoring and multiple backup communication systems. Sarah Collins used her scientific background to study the geological processes that had created their predicament, contributing to research on earthquake effects on underwater cave systems. Morrison's discovery of the alternative entrance led to the mapping of an entirely new section of the cave network, which was subsequently named Morrison's Passage in his honor. However, the new passages remain off-limits to recreational diving due to their complexity and the unpredictable nature of the current flows. The incident serves as a stark reminder that even the most experienced divers operating with the best equipment and safety protocols can find themselves at the mercy of forces far beyond their control. The ocean's depths hold secrets that we are only beginning to understand. And sometimes those secrets can transform a routine exploration into a fight for survival. The Devil's Throat cave system remains a popular destination for experienced technical divers, but the events of October 15, 2019 have forever changed how divers approach this underwater labyrinth. The earthquake that trapped 6 divers in the depths also revealed new wonders. Chambers and passages that had been sealed for millennia were opened, creating opportunities for future exploration. But these new discoveries come with sobering reminders of the risks involved. The ocean is not a forgiving environment, and the combination of technical diving with seismic activity creates scenarios that no amount of training can fully prepare divers to handle. The 6 divers who found themselves sucked into the underwater tunnel system of the Devil's Throat were fortunate to survive their ordeal. Many similar incidents throughout diving history have had far less favorable outcomes. As diving technology continues to advance and more extreme underwater environments become accessible to exploration, the lessons learned from incidents like this become increasingly important. The ocean's depths will always harbor both incredible beauty and mortal danger, often separated by nothing more than a shift in the geological forces that shape our planet's underwater landscape. The story of the Devil's Throat serves as both an inspiration and a warning inspiration for the incredible courage and skill displayed by both the trapped divers and their rescuers, and a warning that the ocean's most remote corners demand respect, preparation, and a healthy dose of humility from anyone brave enough to explore them. If you made it this far, thanks so much for reading. The courage displayed by both the divers who survived this harrowing experience and the rescue teams who risked their lives to save them serves as a testament to the strength of the human spirit. When faced with seemingly impossible circumstances, the ocean may be vast and unforgiving, but it is no match for determination, skill, and the willingness of people to help one another in times of crisis. These stories remind us that exploration and discovery always come with risks, but they also show us that those risks are worthwhile when they lead to greater understanding of our world and demonstrate the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The depths of the ocean may hold dangers we cannot imagine, but they also hold wonders worth discovering, as long as we approach them with the respect and preparation they demand.